So there's something called the I love you dad trend. And what that is that a child will walk up to their parent, either their mother or their father, and then they'll say, I love you. I love you, mom. I love you, dad. And then the parent will make a smart ass remark about their kid that is meant to hurt their feelings or just label them as, and subtextually as unwanted. And then also, there are people who do that as a form of satire, and it's also like shock value because obviously, when you have children, you never want to say, hurtful things to them. So I was watching a video a few weeks ago of this woman calling her child like the accident. And then there's a video, I think Neurodivergent Nate was commenting on, and there was like a few girls that were saying, I love you, dad. One of them was like, has to be 0 or 1 years old. And the father says, the one that I never held. And another one, says, I love you, dad. And he's saying, grumpy and moody, typical woman. And another girl says, I love you, dad, the crier and the complainer, typical woman. And he also says, one where it's like, okay, I was disappointed that you were a girl and all that stuff, So Neurodivergent Nate was saying a couple of things about like how, even if it's satire, it's not funny, or even if he has younger relatives, and with younger relatives, you wouldn't like subject them to that, And the other thing that I will say is, it is a form of emotional abuse because obviously, even if it's satire, it's kind of like that video where the parents throw like invisible ink all over the place and they're yelling and screaming at their kids and they have their kids removed because people said that's criminal mischief. That's also just, a form of child abuse to be, emotionally abusing and manipulating the minors, even if it was a prank really. Or even someone could look at this and say, hey, that's emotional abuse because why are you putting your children on Instagram and knowing that this is controversial, this is shock value, you can make thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of views. And now as your children get older, they're always going to be associated with this. If they remember this, they can always look up this video, 20 years from now. And then the other part of it is, it's definitely, emotionally abusive because all those things are very hurtful. And, it's name calling. And then it's also saying, the child's unwanted, really. And then I also think that the other part of it is it's a very sexist video because it's saying, again, typical woman is a complainer, a know-it-all, a whiner, a disappointment because, I want a son and all that. And I know, like, as we said, there are times when we have children or children are brought into our family and we're not happy to have them, as somebody who's adopted, you get other adopted children and sometimes you're like, I wish I was a single child or something like that, hypothetically. Or sometimes, you have a child, one of the parents are like, no, I don't want an abortion. You keep the child and then you're not happy to have that. Or sometimes you have children thinking it's going to be wonderful and great. And then you have children that are just, it's just not a good experience because it's expensive. You may have children that are young and they're like always screaming and crying every time. So you're like, okay, I thought it's going to be, a beautiful thing, but it's just, a lot of patience and a lot of tolerance. And then the other part of it is that you may have a kid who has mental health issues or other types of issues, and they need like either a lot of like resources, such as psychological resources, such as, medical resources, such as other things, So, we can all understand that, having children can lead to, good experiences and bad experiences. But usually a good parent would be somebody that would be modest and keep these things to themselves. Like, it's, even though this is satire, it's still not appropriate. It's still very hurtful and painful. And then I like what Neurodivergence Nate said, that, if you do these things to your daughters, what's going to happen in 20 years from now when they're on an OnlyFans video and they're doing humiliation porn? Like, somebody takes a pie and smacks in their face, or they have like these porn fetishes where people throw trash on people or dump like food on people to treat them like they're a piece of garbage, really. Because, you can teach your daughter, hey, that's how you're supposed to be treated. You're supposed to be treated like, people can disrespect you. People can, treat you like garbage or humiliate you, or people can just walk through life disrespecting you, no consequences. I remember one time my father said, Matt and Byron are stupid. They both have autism. They both can't learn. I remember my dad chuckling, and my other dad was like saying, you're a fucking asshole. And I also remember one time, I remember people saying that I was autistic and that I could never grow up and be anything. The best that I could do is be a janitor. Or I remember also too, one time, and I'll be honest with you, I did phone sex with my girlfriend in high school. I got caught. And my dad was saying something like, no matter where you go through in life, you're always going to have the fucking brain of a 14-year-old. Oh, no, of like an 8-year-old, no matter where you go in life, and other things like that. Or I remember one time I was in Florida, my younger brother was screaming and crying in the car because he was because everybody walked out to go into the store, my parents and my grandparents. And I was telling him, just stop being a crybaby, because it's this is the middle of the night, you're screaming and yelling. And there was also something a few weeks before that where I went to use the bathroom. My brother fell on the ground and he was screaming and yelling and kicking his legs in the air because he wanted me to not go to the bathroom and give him attention, really. But he was a spoiled brat, really. But I remember how I called him a crybaby. My dad got in my face and said no, Byron, you're a fucking asshole, and other things like that. So emotional abuse is very powerful. And I remember going through life, overlooking when people disrespected me, or just always finding relationships with people who were very hurtful to me, or other things. It's just not, it's not good. It's just not good. You have to really treat your children with respect, or else, they're going to go through life thinking that, respect is something that they can never obtain. And that could lead to toxic relationships. Or I remember my father saying to me a few years ago when I was getting in a lot of trouble, saying, I wonder why you have no self-esteem. You graduate college, you do all these great things, but look what happened when I graduated college. I worked that job with workplace bullying. I was almost murdered by the police. I struggled with suicidal thoughts. My parents always it's about your results. It's about you getting a better job, better opportunities. And that really, it was not really about processing my trauma. And also I remember 2 weeks after I graduated college, my dad just stormed into my bedroom and he had a look like he was about to explode, really, because he wanted me, because he felt $100,000 jobs fell out of the sky, really. When actually, I graduated in 2010 during the recession, the Great Recession, really, So, if you teach your children that they can be disrespected and you put them in skits like this and you're emotionally abusive, you are setting your kids up for failure, really. And sometimes, like I've said, that there's plenty of ways to make money on the internet. You don't always need to do these type of shock value videos, in long term, it does more positive, it does more negative it does more harm than help. And then the other thing too is that you have narcissistic parents that will walk away, years later and say, hey, I was joking, or you need to get over it, when actually they need to say, hey, you know what, that wasn't a good choice and all that. So it's unfortunate that this video exists. It's unfortunate that this is a trend, and emotional abuse is very powerful. And there's a difference between if a child is misbehaving and you yell at a kid, or if a child's doing something stupid and you call them a dumbass, and videos like this where you're intentionally just, being disrespectful or making a video about disrespect, even if it's satire.